Alrighty, hello every folks, and good morning. Welcome to part 2 of 3 of the review through for Crimson Tactics. So, it actually just recently came to my attention that the game's actually on discount at the moment, so I figured, you know what, it might be a good time to go get the what feels like mid-game thoughts out of the way for this one. So, there's a lot of things that have happened since the last review through part here. And honestly, it's interesting. Like I'm still having a fairly positive experience here. Like let's go ahead and talk about some of the kind of neat things that have changed, like from the get go. First of all, I was saying in the first one that it seemed a little weird how the cross-glassing had been handled. So for those unfamiliar, this game feels in many ways like what would happen if you were imagining up a cross between a Final Fantasy Tactics, Tactics Advance, and Tactics Ogre, bringing in a lot of kind of different aspects from this, that, or the other. And I specifically mentioned feel because the fights feel very, very like FFT, FFTA, but the scale and the kinds of options that are available on your people feel very Tactics Ogre. So, again, it feels like a solid middle ground between those. But the main controversy that came from this game was over the content, so that's kind of why I'm doing this whole review through thing. Anyway, so let's go ahead and talk about the cross-glassing first of all. So at first I wasn't sure why it was working the way it was working because the system works a little bit like this. You have your list of skills here, where essentially you'll pop in stuff into your slots, and then every time you switch to a new class, you're able to go and buy more things from that particular class. Basically, you improve them kind of individually and over time and what have you. And in many ways, it seemed like, okay, so you're just basically going in and buying the skill. Like, why would you be hopping between classes or whatever else when in many cases they might be better off sticking with their current class? Now, that said, this has changed over time. That was a very early game assessment. As time has gone on, this has actually turned into a pretty darn fun system. My main criticism so far is that it really would be nice to be able to tell people to look differently. So I'd love to be able to, at the very least, switch people out for other classes' sprites or something. So as a bit of an example, let's say, who do we want to go for here? So like I have one guy here that's the Bobarian, or Barboian rather. Actually, I probably should change him to Bobarian. It makes more sense. Anyway, so in his particular case, he is a unit that is mounted. He is effectively an archer crossed with a berserker. The main idea here being that he essentially goes up on his horse. He parks up in an area. Being on a horse, he has twice the space of a regular unit, and effectively he protects the ones around him here. So essentially he ends up taking headshots, foot shots, what have you, for crits and or leg breaks in order to do the archer thing. But at the same time, he has revenge here, which means that he will essentially counter versus any unit that tries to attack a friendly. Given that he's got some pretty decently high stats, surprisingly, he punches really damn hard for a guy that's an archer. This dude is absolutely jacked. The idea there being that that's his kind of first phase, and then towards the second phase, he can turn on this Battle Lust ability, which gives him a bunch of stat boosts, including a strength and defense boost, while causing him to go berserk. This actually functions particularly well with the horse mount system here, because if he ever gets low on his horse health, which I should mention, in most cases, horse health can't actually be replenished. It's essentially like roughly twice the size of your normal health bar. But this creates a situation where it gives him more longevity on the lower end of this health bar, and that berserk is removed if he's kicked off the horse, essentially allowing him to reset out of a otherwise permanent status, while being this weird like ranged shield unit, and that's a really fun combination to play around with. Additionally, we have something like this where I had hired a necromancer. Where their whole shtick is, I mean, they basically have three skills to the class, where they would summon a unit. Now, these units are, well, I mean, by definition, trash. They're essentially trash mobs that you spawn in onto the field in order to go take hits. As soon as a ghoul unit, which can either be a skeleton, ghost, or phantom, just kind of whichever flavor of undead you prefer, as soon as one of them is knocked down, they are then able to then summon another one. The one that's knocked down will eventually come back to life. The way the undead work in this game is actually pretty neat, where an undead unit can be exorcised once, if they're killed in their normal phase, But if they're knocked down, they will come back once, but the second time they just basically disintegrate. This essentially means that you have a case where you can just keep sending in trash mobs, allowing you to actually get pretty decently far into having a sort of literal, well, lack of meat shield, I guess you could say. But at the same time, this guy's resistance is going up every time that he's going and summoning more units. At the same time, he's also once again fishing for crits with a longbow and essentially just doing the archer thing. The plan was to actually work him towards magical suppression here to give him silencing arrows. But this also leads to other things, where pretty much every class has some kind of interesting counter ability associated with them. Like, for example, if you have a very evasive unit with something like Quick Draw, anytime that a magic or ranged attack fails against that unit, they will return fire. So this can be very useful if you set up a bait unit to make that happen. So overall, this class system, it's less of a like individual thing by itself where you're going and specifically building somebody towards that thing, and more a case where enemy units that you recruit will typically come with most of their skill list already figured out by the mid game. The actual skill list for each of these classes aren't insanely long or anything. It's typically an FFT kind of a situation. But it does create this interesting idea where they typically will come with all of this stuff already learned, and you can then just immediately throw them into another class in order to just instantly combine them. There is a permadeath system at play here, and this is fun. Like this is a good way to do it. Like right here, let's go ahead and set this guy up for this right here, where if this guy is targeted by any attack, he'll counter with a long-range defense break. So we'll go ahead and do that. And additionally, because he was cross-classed as a warrior, or rather, he was a warrior cross-classed into a berserker. Yes, he absolutely looks like the Dragonborn. That was definitely no accident. Anyways, he'll get flank attacks if any unit nearby does an attack, and additionally would get revenge attacks if any friendly units are attacked. So this guy's constantly attacking, but at the same time, he's given a weapon here with a 2-tile range. The two-handed warhammers in this game, which I guess technically there's only two-handed warhammers, work similarly to spears from Tactics Ogre, where they will be targeting 2 tiles in front of them. For better or worse, depending on your positioning. Like if you set him up 2 tiles away and then you try to flank at close range, and he comes in and accidentally smushes your own guy, that can be a little bit of a thing. Anyway, so this kind of stuff is absolutely fun to play around with. Like the day-to-day gameplay in this game is really damn solid. I really like it. Typically you find 2 classes that are a fun little combination, and interesting stuff happens. So let's go ahead and get that stuff out of the way too. But the thing is, there were also a few bits of jank. We'll be getting to those janky things pretty soon. But yeah, let's continue on here because I actually want to talk about the classes before we get to that. Just before I end up inevitably getting sidetracked. So as time goes on, you end up getting more classes. One of the criticisms I saw coming in from a lot of the reviews was a lack of unique units. Personally, I'm not too fussed about that because I really like, cross-classing generics. So mileage on that may vary for you. The way that they handle it in this game is that for every chapter that you go into, you are put into a situation where you are basically given one guest unit that is essentially showing off that particular class. So you go for the Necromancy Arc, you end up getting your Necromancer there. If you're in or in the early chapters there, you'll end up seeing more duelists or rogues showing up. These are more for the kind of rebel faction, as it were. Like these ones, they show up in the kind of standard SRPG sense. But the Necromancer, you get a guest Necromancer. He sticks with you for that particular arc, and then, I don't know whether you actually decide what happens to him or not, but either way, you can get generic Necromancers after that. After that, we get another unit that shows up as a bit of a generic, but then you get a unique Dragon Knight, a guy that rides dragons as their mount. We'll get more into the mounts in just a moment, but either way, as far as the Dragon Knights go, I don't know where you get more class marks for this guy, but technically they're unlocked. And basically, their whole thing is that they're specialized in the mount system. That they will be able to restore the balance points of that particular unit. Essentially, they are your Chocobo Knight kind of situation for this particular game, where they are seemingly built around their mount. I'm hoping that one of these later classes is a horse version, or I actually haven't tested whether I don't believe this guy can actually equip a horse, but I really hope that there's a horse version of this. So, okay, I was about to go on a whole thing about the mounts. We'll get to that in a moment. Then we have the Sword Masters. So, I gotta say, personally, I love the idea behind the Sword Masters. It's a pretty cool mix of ideas. So effectively, think if you took the general theming of a Tactics Ogre Sword Master there, and then you combined them with the Tinker from Final Fantasy Tactics Advance in A2, where their whole shtick is that they have several, or I guess a combination of the Tinker and the Paravir, I guess you could say from TA and TA2. So in their particular case, they're a unit that's essentially a Spellblade kind of situation, where they will have their basic attacks. They'll go attempt to inflict a debuff with their attacks. They can very quickly stack up debuffs. So in this game, when a debuff is applied, you can just keep stacking that shit over and over and over. I will get to why I was genuinely happy to see this entire faction eliminated in just a moment. But either way, you can stack those over and over and over. So in their particular case, their kind of bread and butter is I think it was a Serpent Dance. That's their first ability, in which they go up and they have a 50-50 chance. They either inflict the debuff and inflict more stacks of it, or they miss and inflict it on themselves. This means that if they ever miss, they're just kind of dead now. Now, this does mean that they are incredibly hard countered by their main nemesis here, which is the ninja. Which I do like that from a storytelling perspective. That's pretty neat. You have the standard samurai versus ninja kind of situation going on in their particular chapter, and again, that's neat. There's some stuff that I would really like to see have done differently, but I like the overall theme and general idea there. Which, that being said, one interesting note I will mention on the samurai faction. I don't quite know the background of the devs or whatever else. But recently, for total coincidental reasons, I was watching this channel that was going over some kind of movie over some samurai show that's coming out pretty soon, and there was a whole diatribe in that whole thing over why the different groups sat differently at different times or whatever else. Now, granted, I'm sure it wasn't necessarily directly that particular reasoning, but I do appreciate that the different factions sit differently. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. So as far as the Swordmaster goes, very cool idea. Again, 50-50 chance. Their hit chance you can make really high. And I should also clarify that this game makes use of a pretty fun defensive system, which thankfully does not cause their attacks to blow back. But if they ever miss, they are 100% almost like your melee XCOM kind of situation, where as soon as it misses, you are definitely going to remember it, where your guy missed and set themselves on fire. So they can freeze people, they can set them on fire. I don't know what other abilities they had, because I haven't made more use of this particular class yet. Though that said, I do have class marks for it. I'm not really sure why it says that it's still locked, because I did complete both of these guys' chapters, so again, not really sure what the deal is. I'm assuming I get that pretty soon, though. Now, what I would have liked to see handled differently, and this one's a bit of an odd one, is basically every time that you ever fight these guys for one reason or another. See, they're meant to be intimidating because they are built around stun locking. This basically means that, in my particular case, I have units that are very heavily invested into, things like flanks and counterattacks and a lot of defensive layers. Now, that said, there wasn't really a huge emphasis on stun, but the first time that I ran into them, it basically just targeted down the leader. It wasn't the end of the world. Second time we ended up fighting these guys, though, I kid you not, I was there for 45 minutes trying to clear a map where they were basically bouncing off with all of their attacks, but stacking stun so consistently that I was basically waiting for them to miss in order to even hopefully have a turn. My mounted knight there, the flank knight, what is it, like stabby cavalry or whatever I have her name as. She did not get a single action outside of moving forward that entire 45 minutes. Like, the fact that that they can stack so many stacks of stun gets overwhelming very quickly. Granted, again, they're not exactly a big offensive threat, so like these guys are running around like 500-600 health, and every time they do one of these attacks, it's like 50 damage, and yeah, it was kind of awkward. Eventually, they died because it turns out having an archer spamming out skeletons just gives them something else to potentially focus on. But yeah, this was a case where like it was just a very very awkward long fight. You do have accessories that would help you get rid of that. You do have the shielding options to help you gain some ground, but either way, just so you know, that can potentially happen. Now, I want to take a quick second to discuss the counter options that are available for that, though. Because for those situations, this game actually does something that I really, really like in terms of the shields. So every one of your units will essentially kind of have an option to carry something in their offhand, whether it's a pistol, whether it's a crossbow, whether it's a book or a shield. And you do have other classes that are able to equip multiple melee units for different reasons. Sometimes it's for double attacks, like if you want to do your traditional double attack, you would need dual strike as well as dual wield in order to be able to equip two melee weapons and also to equip with attack with two of them at once. But I really love how they did the offhands in this. It's not immediately intuitive, except, well, the first two are. You basically have a physical shield and a magical shield. This means that the next physical attack or the next magical attack, depending on which one you decide to go for, will bounce off of that unit. So you essentially can move them into position, put up their shield, and all of those stun attacks will just bounce off their shield. It's just physical, it's just magical. There's no other properties, there's no, the finisher dodged past your mind's eye or whatever else going on here. It's just physical or it's just magical. And you do see the AI making use of this pretty regularly too, and it means that you're suddenly given a reason to refocus your attention in different directions. So I love how that's handled, and additionally, it's just a nice touch that all of your weapons and shields will have different sprites when they're going and being shown in the game itself. So I appreciate that. Additionally, towards the second half of the game here, you have items of various tiers here that will allow you to specialize towards particular stats. Specifically, they're iron at this point. For some reason, their upgrade is aluminum, but whatever. And it just gives you a massive stack of stats towards that particular direction, just enough to be noticeable on that particular unit. So if you ever notice somebody's lacking a lot of defense, or potentially just wants that push for offense or what have you, you do have the option to go into that. Your standard armor slots are still typically just direct upgrades of each other, though I do appreciate that there actually are cases, like right here, where potentially you do have skills that give you a reason to actually use lower tier equipment. So something like the duelist here, their whole thing is about situational exploits. So, for example, here, let's just go ahead and go over to the learn pile to give you a better idea of this stuff. So, like, Weapon Vantage is a case where, like, a unit will essentially do better if they are either faster or heavier than the other guy. So, if there's a mismatch between you using a heavy weapon and them using a light weapon, or vice versa, you get a better ability there. Then it goes to your standard 100% hit ability, and then you get something like Armored Authority here, which will give you less damage if your armor is comparatively lower tier than your enemy. So if you, for example, want to cheap out and have somebody running around in cheaper armor, their value will actually be better potentially than the better armor in their hands. Then they get their back attack ability with Ambush. Then they also get Second Strike, where in the duelist's case, if they were to miss a first attack, or if it's blocked by a shield, they will attack a second time. The caveat being that second attack won't trigger further follow-up abilities. which I actually should point out, if any ability triggers before a flank or before a revenge or anything like that, it will in many cases interrupt them. So, like, for example, during the Necromancy Arc, there's a lot of zombies that will spew poison back at you. That can interrupt flank builds, or potentially if there's a unit that has some kind of a preempt type ability. I forget what it was called because I've only seen it once. It also will interrupt that. But anyways, Second Strike counts as one of these reactions happening before flank, so it will essentially cause the potential follow-ups to not happen. But it's a very useful saving ability because if you miss, you're not triggering those flanks anyway. All right, then you have a dual strike here, which will allow them to attack with both hands at the same time. And this is potentially very cool in the setup of what the duelist actually does, namely that they're using a melee attack and a ranged attack at the same time. Have you ever been using the Buccaneer over in Tactics Ogre, and you're like, man, it would be really cool if they could use their sword and gun on the same attack? That's what we're looking at here. Like, they stab one guy in front of them, and they go and they shoot at somebody else over at a diagonal. It's a pretty dang interesting implementation here. Actually, it's something I've wanted to see in a lot of games. I'm surprised that this has not been done more often. Riposte, then, will retaliate with a melee attack if they block anything. So, potentially very handy for those shield builds, giving them a more offensive skew on the same thing. And you could potentially see how this is stacking up more and more in an interesting direction as you carry on. Towards the mid-game, this really opens up to the point where you're getting points and skills pretty freely, so you can swap people around between different classes and pick stuff up, and usually you want to combine maybe 2 or 3. Just to give you something interesting that's going on here. Like, let's say this guy was an archer per the story, but in his particular case, we switched him over to sword and pistol, going for a case where in most situations he's just looking to set up flanks with the rest of the team. Sometimes he goes for backstabs, sometimes he goes for these for these dual strike things here with his pistol and sword. But the guy's become an absolute monster over time. So that's really good to see. And I should also point out that I've had the adaptable difficulty on, which has meant that we've been pretty much under-leveled the entire playthrough here. Like, I think my highest guy on the team here is 26, and the recommended level right now is 32, and they're still doing just fine. Like, we're still getting through fights pretty darn consistently. It's been a good time there. Additionally, let's say if you're wondering whether casters can combine in fun ways too, yeah, they've got a lot of that going on there too. I should mention, for all of the cool stuff that this system does, it's a little bit hard to wrap your head around at first. Like, that's why it took me quite a while, like until the mid game, until I started really understanding a lot of these systems. That said, it does try to explain them to you. They're just not necessarily that intuitive from the get-go. But to give you an idea of the kind of strategic options that we're looking at, I have these two support casters here, Pauline and Biddy. Yeah, you can give them funny names. I just find it funny that this guy's name is Biddy. Anyway, so, like in their particular case, most of the time, if they're feeling defensive, they go up and they bait out archers by putting up their shields. That's pretty kind of self-explanatory there. From the wizard side of things, they've got their spellcaster different tier abilities that allow them to use different kinds of magic at the same time. Additionally, they've got unlocked the ability to do intense and where's the other one? Intense and strategic magic, which allow them to cast variations of their spells. So, like, let's say we have Rekindle over here. Technically, class is an ability, but it still can benefit from spell benefits, which is a revive ability. Now, by default, it's going to revive somebody with 25% health. However, there's a pretty decent chance that they're going to get taken out by another follow-up attack because they probably were in a dangerous position already. Now you do the intense version, and now they're suddenly coming back with 50% health, which means that they're more than likely going to survive that first attack. Additionally, there's the cross version, which allows them to cast in a 5-tile area. This again can be applied to anything magical, which means in their particular case, I've had a lot of situations where I've sent multiple units in with low health, specifically to take advantage of a cross rekindle in order to revive them all at the same time after they tanked some hits. So you're not really penalized for having units knocked down to the ground here, and the bleed out timers are fairly forgiving, so you can do some of those risky plays without anything too crazy going on there. So again, the bread and butter of this game is really this strategic kind of stuff here. So I'm really liking it from that perspective. I did actually mention that I would go over the mounts, so let's go over that real quick. Um, so as I mentioned, there's two types of mounts, from what I understand in this game. You've got horses, you've got dragons. Now, many of the complaints that I've seen have said that they wanted to see more done with the mount system. In my opinion, I would have been happy with just the horses as is. Okay, so the way that the mounts work is that, as I mentioned earlier, you attach them to a unit. This causes them to have two times their deploy limit, which means that they will count as two units. However, this balance bar is effectively about two times a standard unit's health bar. Additionally, this means that unit in question will actually multiply whatever their weapon range is by two as well. So let's say we go over here and we look at horsey cavalry more, right? So in their particular case, they have a spear. So this spear, as you can see on the right there, will be able to hit in all of the tiles around them. Now, given that the grid updates for when you're on a horse, you can see it gives them a pretty wide hitting area. Combined with the fact that they flank, this means that this is a unit that's able to block multiple tiles at once, is able to give follow-up attacks on all of those tiles, and additionally will be really, really good when compared with any kind of defensive abilities. So I've had cases where her entire function was going forward, putting up her shield, and then just taking follow-up attacks, pretty much never dying. As I mentioned, this particular strategy versus the 45 minutes worth of friggin' serpent stance from those sword masters was like she never actually went down over the course of that fight. She was just basically sitting there, tanking, blocking, whatever else that entire time. I mean, you can get pretty nuts with your defensive plays, and I like that kind of stuff. Like cases like this, where if you have units transferring in from warriors, they would essentially get stronger from any units that are nearby them, which means that they're better in formations, or stuff like this here, where a unit will get a higher amount of TP, which essentially means it's the same thing as Tactician, more or less, from Tactics Ogre, which means that they're just going to be using their other abilities more often. Now, one of the criticisms that myself and others have said about this were the debuffs, which I will say I think it's more of a early game numbers just don't stretch that far kind of situation, because I have been noticing the debuffs having more and more of an effect as the game has gone on, to the point where actually using defense breaks to set up a bunch of flanks has actually been pretty darn handy. That said, there are still mechanics that I'm not sure are necessarily working as they maybe are intended to. Like, for example, I've had this unit, who, funnily enough, I wasn't actually intending to use. But actually, quick backstory on this one. I had another rogue that had died, but they had never quite performed like I was hoping they would, because I like the idea of a general rogue type of class. So I was wondering what their deal was. So I hired this random rogue, figured maybe the AI knew what it was doing a little bit better. So essentially, what had happened was that I once again was kind of unimpressed with how they were performing, and so I had tried not to use them. However, the game just sort of tries to guess who you'd want in every particular fight. It just tries to spawn more people into like whatever the deploy system is, and then you just kind of adjust accordingly. It doesn't really remember what you previously put in there, but it also doesn't seem to be picking highest levels, so I'm not really sure what it goes by. But for whatever reason, it constantly insisted that I bring this Pia Frey character to every damn fight since, like, Chapter 2. I don't know why it's so insistent that I always bring her along, but she has gotten at least a few fights under her belt as a result. Now, that said, one of her abilities here, as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of potential debuffs flying around, essentially says that it will do more damage proportionate to the debuffs the target is currently affiliated with, and also inflicts bleeding. I don't know what this is supposed to mean exactly, because I've seen somebody with like 5-6 stacks of like a stun or a disarm or something like that, because I use a lot of disarm abilities on this team, and it didn't really seem to really do anything more than her regular attack. So actually, I should point out it was probably doing less than her basic attack. So I don't really know exactly what was going on there, but that might not be targeting the right stuff. I don't know. However, it is funny to see stuff like this, where if they evade a melee attack, they'll steal a little bit of money from somebody. It's not exactly a like huge amount of money or anything like that. And personally, I would have preferred seeing this be like a recovery item or something, but it's fine. It's a fun little flavor move, you know. Again, personally, my favorite one was still the way the Fell Seal handled that one with just counter stealing like crafting components and whatever. I guess actually it could work the same way here. Though that said, you know, flavor wise, it works better in this particular situation. Because those crafting components would drop off over time. That would be a whole other list of items. Whatever. Okay, never mind. It's fine. But yeah, as far as their other abilities here, like hit and run, it says that they gain the ability to perform a long distance move after executing an attack. I don't know if that's necessarily working right either, because then again, the phrasing also makes me not really sure what this is supposed to do. Like, I think they're meant to take a long move to get into position, then attack, then have a long move to run out of there. The way that I was reading this initially was that they would be able to go forward, attack, and retreat, which doesn't seem to be how it works, because they still have their turn end normally if they do that. For those that didn't know, this game uses a kind of like XCOM, new XCOM kind of system, wherein essentially your movement and actions are kind of like two different points during the turn, and you can spend both in order to move. So this allows you to get into position or potentially set up like, you know, flanks on horses and things. It's a really fun strategic thing in this context. Anyway, I actually just noticed one more thing that I completely forgot to discuss Ninja Guy. Okay. So, ninjas so far, I just encountered this class like a friggin' 5 minutes ago, so not literally 5 minutes ago, but still, it's, you know, it just happened. So I can't say I know very much about these guys as of yet, but generally been relatively unimpressed. But I guess we'll see how it goes over time. So okay, let's get one more thing out of the way here too while we're on this particular screen. So weapons actually have pretty wide different ranges. Like, for example, you'll notice with this guy, he has the ability to do a sweeping attack if he were to equip a bigger sword. Every class will have variations of this, like for example, axe users and broadsword users basically get the same weapon. I don't know if there will be unique variants at some point, but for all intents and purposes, they're like the 3-tile sweeper, whereas other units, let's say, you know, like swords will be going and attacking over here, axes will be very similar, but lances would be objectively better if they can use them depending on the situation. That also said, though, that's also not really the full story, because there will be other units, like for example, again, the duelist here, that can spec into abilities for weapons to counter other weapons. So, if I can find it here, it should be this right here. No, that's weapon vantage. Where is... I don't think I actually have him running that ability. Let me see. Weapon triangle. There we go. It's hard to read here because it's kind of smushed out, but basically it says that they will do... here, how does it phrase it? Let's see if I can get up close to the screen. The unit deals more damage to the target based on the weapons they have equipped. Lance beats sword, sword beats axe, axe beats lance. So there's, again, like little bits and pieces. They're just kind of cool touches, you know? Alright. So as far as that goes, like, overall battle mechanics, I'm really darn happy about. Now, I will say the scripting in some cases has been interesting. Like, let's say, for example, there was a sword, or not a sword, there was a fight earlier during this whole arc. There was a guy named Gus, Mr. Gus Bishop. He showed up during a fight, or rather, he showed up during a cutscene, and he said, "Hey, would you like to go to my Totally Not Ambush in the Mountains?" So you go to his Totally Not Ambush in the Mountains. I think it was actually over here somewhere. And when you go there, it's like, oh, hey, guess what? There was totally an ambush in the mountains. Who could have seen that coming? And he is one of the units that's deployed during that particular fight. An interesting thing about this is that the game will occasionally throw in named NPCs as just an extra in the fight, and usually they'll have extra dialogue if you kill them. Now, in a few cases, there were oversights in terms of, like, being able to recruit bosses and things like that to softlock the fight, but most of those were seemingly fixed. However, I think Mr. Gus Bishop was missed, because in his particular case, you know, he shows up during that cutscene, but then he also shows up during the fight. So we killed him. He bled out. He didn't have any dialogue reflecting this, but the dude was very dead. During the follow-up fight, over in the mountains somewhere, I think it was here, maybe it was here, I don't know, there were some mountains involved. But during the follow-up fight, he ends up going and showing up again in a cutscene, running in from the opposite direction. That's interesting, because we just killed you. Anyway, he escapes that cutscene, and your Dragon Knight is sent off in order to go chase him down. That is this guy. Now, what's interesting is I think they had expected that you would automatically intuit that you're supposed to equip his dragon on him. I hadn't. For whatever reason, I was just using him as the spear stabby guy. And completely didn't pay attention to the fact that he had a dragon available as a mount. I will say, this is completely my fault and not the game's fault in this situation, because it felt like every single cutscene they're like, oh, hey, what's Emmerich up to? Oh, he's out there feeding his dragon. Oh, what's he up to now? Oh, he's outside helping people carry lumber on the back of his dragon. Like, oh, what's he doing over there? Hanging out with his dragon playing chess or something. I don't know, maybe they're going and watching some Netflix. I don't know, the dude has dragon. Did you know he has dragon? Like, they hammer you over the head with that particular thing. Again, in a decent way. They're reminding you to go and put him on his damn mount. Now, the thing is, again, I was just using him as the stabby guy, and I already had my, my cavalry horse over here, so I'm good on cavalry stuff. So my stubborn ass completely doesn't realize that he's meant to be on that mount. This seemingly created a situation where his version his version for being on the mount or off the mount, I'm assuming are counted as two different things. This is like total speculation on my part right now. When that fight starts, he chases this Gus character off the map, right? Which is kind of interesting because then he reappears in the party screen. Again, I'm assuming from the game's perspective that they're like check for Emmerich plus Dragon, because that version can be removed from your party. His infantry version can't be. So he's suddenly force deployed on a fight that he just ran away from. But then, yeah, after that, it wasn't really an issue again. I will mention whenever they give you these kind of like show-off characters, they are typically force deployed and are something that you can't remove, so that you try out the new class. This is typically fine because you usually have a pretty large party limit, and usually they're just a bit of an extra. Now, again, I'm assuming that this was an oversight there. It was just a bit of a funny situation that will happen sometimes. I will say that was the only personal, kind of egregious what the fuck moment that I saw. Again, previously people realized that you could recruit one of the early game bosses, but that's already been patched. So for what it's worth, while there are, bugs, oversights, whatever else, they have been working on correcting those over time. And honestly, like, a lot of the backlash that this game got, to my mind, still feels like a bit much. Because as far as I'm concerned, there's a lot of work put in here. The systems are interesting. The story that they're trying to tell, while not perfectly executed, works. I mean, it's like, all intents and purposes, they're doing the best with what they've got, and you can feel the effort that's going on there. You'll see characters doing stuff in the background of cutscenes. The fight scenes between characters feel pretty satisfying. Especially they like to do the sort of FFT blood and gore shock effect kind of thing, and they pull it off pretty successfully. There was actually one cutscene right before this that I was considering reloading and redoing the entire fight just to show here, wherein essentially somebody's stabbed, thrown off a wall, they limp forward, and a guy essentially runs up, pulls out a crossbow, pops him in the head, and then the edge of the crossbow just causes his head to be propped up on the pavement, or the crossbow bolt rather. So he's just standing awkwardly pinned in this weird broken neck situation while the other guy laughs at him. So yeah, those kinds of scenes, you can tell somebody really went to town on those. Now, potential spoilers for whatever's going on right now. I don't know what's going on right now. I just want to show a fight real quick. And I'm expecting that they'll probably show some stuff. Let's see. So there's an archer guy, there's that guy, and there's Mr. Guy that was once a blacksmith that's now basically an assassin, who's going to be taking people out all over the place. So, alright. Fair enough. It's a pretty standard we are bad guys, let's fight kind of deal here, apparently. But still, most of the cutscenes have been really darn solid as far as that goes. Actually, I appreciate a lot of little details. I forget if I mentioned this last time, but I really like the fact that they make a big deal over the fact that this guy essentially carries around a custom bow wherever he goes. Now, granted, I upgraded him to a handgun a long time ago, but in his particular case, like he still will carry the thing around for cutscenes. But whenever they're not actively in a fight, he goes and removes the string from it in order to basically be a kind of realistic, convenient carry type of situation. There's a lot of little situations like that where there will be little kind of touches and attention to detail during cutscenes that they really didn't need to do, but they did anyway. One thing I find funny is when it comes to the particularly who they end up deploying here. I think I'm going to do a challenge run of this game after completing it, because the way that units are picked on this deploy screen absolutely fascinates me, because I have no idea what the criteria are. I went by this, or I was going over this a bit earlier, but this is both a good and a bad thing. For a good thing, it causes you to potentially maybe use units that you weren't otherwise thinking of using. For a bad thing, sometimes it'll just completely insist on using this rogue that you have made it a direct point that you don't intend to use on every single map in the game. I don't know why it really wants me to use that rogue, but whatever. Okay, let's discuss a few other things too. This freedom of movement on the 3D space here, I vaguely mentioned earlier, but I really love how interactive this particular thing is. I know it seems minor, but it feels really nice, especially if playing on a Steam Deck or something like that, to be able to zoom in slightly, zoom out slightly, what have you. It feels very intuitive as far as that's concerned. Alright, let's see. Let's set up this party real quick and carry on here. Who the hell is even deployed on this team right now? Let's see, not those guys. So I know it's not, like, trying to make your low levels stick out more with this random selection here, because these low levels never show up. There was, like, one time when Mr. General Fight Guy got deployed, but either way. Let's see, I've got my 2 support casters, those seem to always be there. I got my, this guy. We'll get our snipey archer out of there. I'm going to cross-class her into something else, and let's see, who else do we have here? What are we fighting exactly? Let's see, can we get it? Any idea? It looks like a lot of, I would assume, heavy units over there. Yeah, we got archers, we got some healing, mostly heavy units. Okay. So, in that particular case, we can actually take this guy out of here, and we can probably run with whatever's left. So I should mention the undead wave strategy almost completely doesn't work versus knights and warriors. Simply put, if you're doing flank attacks and such, they actually cannot trigger flanks if you're actually attempting to attack with like lower end skeletons and stuff like that, because their attacks will bounce off warrior and knight armor. Creating this interesting situation where, yeah, they can't potentially be used for follow-ups in those situations, but the ranged attacks will still work. I'm not sure entirely how intentional that was, but it kind of seems to make sense. I would imagine a knight would not have much trouble with a zombie. In fact, I've seen a lot of these random trash videos over the years over like, oh man, how would they handle zombies in medieval times? Like, it seems like full plate would pretty much be perfect for that situation. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I don't think they're biting through metal, and realistically speaking, that stuff was good enough to, to take, hammer hits and whatnot, so... I mean, it seems like they'd probably be ideally suited for it, actually. They were built for melee. They were min-maxed for melee survivability. Okay, I should probably also mention one more thing here. So this guy is actually reminding me because of that Bobarian guy that I have set up. So there's still also occasional jank on some random skills, like that's the Bloodlust ability, which causes them to gain a stat bonus and go berserk. It's cool and all, but it also has a bit of lag every time that he goes to take his turn, to the point, like, it's a concerning amount of lag, to the point where it feels like the game's just gone and crashed or something, but it doesn't, so, I don't know, it just feels weird when that happens. Now, one thing that I had as a criticism earlier that I've actually kind of changed my mind on is these debuff abilities. So there's a lot of different overlapping debuff abilities from all different kind of elemental types. I will say the elemental system, I'm like, 25 hours into this game, and I still do not understand the elemental counters whatsoever, but I will mention that The debuff stacking and whatever else does feel good between different types. Like, you'd think something like Melting Arms, which causes disarm, and Paralytic Wave, which causes root, stun, and disarm, would have some conflict there. But essentially, if you need to guarantee that it's definitely going to be disarm, you go for Melting. And if you want to kind of roll the dice for something better, that's when you would go for Paralytic Wave, because sometimes it also does nothing. Which, again, it's fun strategically to switch between these different options there. You have ones that will guarantee one particular type of debuff, like the Ice one will inflict stun, whereas the Wind one might potentially just make you run faster. It feels... I would say over time it's kind of felt like how my kid brain understood Magic the Gathering or something like that over time. I guess probably the best way to put it. Additionally, I should point out that, like you saw right there, you can actually use mounts to bypass certain movement restrictions. So it seems like whenever your unit is currently already standing on a tile here, like in this case he's running around, but I could be wrong in this, but it seemed like it was potentially using the tiles that a mount was standing on to essentially allow you to circumvent those kinds of defenses. I could be wrong on that. You don't really see this Rampart Aura effect that often. It's called, like, I forget what it's called here. It's not Rampart Aura, but it's, I think it's like Sanctuary something, like, whatever. We can go check the guy. It's almost like there's a pretty easy way to do this. What's it called? Field Sanctuary, there we go. Anyway, it's good. So I like that that's there. Folks are saying that there were not enough Zone of Control abilities. There are Zone of Control abilities. They're there. Alright, so this is going to be one of those cases where I mentioned that you got to be careful over how you're using your flanks. So if this guy hits, he's going to get absolutely pummeled by his own guy, but it will allow us to break through here. Or at least attempt to break through. We'll go ahead and do a Intense Rekindle here on our guy up there. Kind of lost track of where my my thing is. So there we go. We'll just get him up with half of his health. And also, as you may notice, like if there were multiple units laid out over here, they would be able to go do an area revive and stuff like that. So the ability to modify your spells for casts feels good. Like, granted, it's definitely been done a lot of different ways by different games over the years. It's not like this is the only game that's ever done it, but I like how it's done here. Let's see. Can we... well, okay. I have my main character intentionally overpowered for the hell of it reasons. So, like, essentially every stat up item I've intentionally dumped on my main character, because everybody else can potentially, die and bleed out and whatever else. He can't, so we've kind of got old RPG syndrome going on there, where the rest of your party comes and goes, but your main character gets to become a god. An interesting feature that they actually have here is that there seems to be some algorithm in place. I don't know if you'd call it an algorithm, but some kind of formula in place to tell you when a unit is missing a particular stat to be effective. So you'll notice like there's little exclamation marks, essentially saying like there's saying that a unit can use some particular stat well, and that you've got cards available for it. As you may have noticed earlier, it had those little red exclamation marks, and every time that you pick up a tarot card, it'll say like, hey, we've got some stat upgrades, it'll be useful for this class, but it'll be grayed out if they don't need it. I do appreciate that little detail. Let's see, do we go for 225, or we can potentially break this guy for the 150? Nah, I blocked it, bummer. Alright. That's fine. Yeah, I should mention also, if you're a fan of Tactics Ogre PSP or One Vision, this is going to be one of those games that really, really kind of likes the idea of holding lines. So, just so you know, that is a thing. Okay. Let's go ahead and hit this guy to set up a... Well, actually, I don't think he'll be able to set up a flank in this case. But we'll go ahead and double attack here. So we'll go ahead and sword that guy and pistol that guy. Go ahead and leave him right there. It wasn't really an effective use of his turn. I just kind of wanted to show that you can do that. Additionally, we don't want this horse getting into position, so we'll go ahead and move you over here. I have to mention that my eyes have kind of adjusted to how the visuals or the visuals of the tiles look, to the point that I can play this very comfortably on handheld mode. But I do still have some difficulty seeing it on the screen right now because the contrast is a little different. I do wish that there was a higher contrast with the tiles that you were selecting. As it stands, it can be a little bit hard to tell sometimes. Anyway, we're going to get that mounted unit completely out of the equation here. We should be able to kind of surround and deal with these guys right here. Let's go ahead and go for a paralytic discharge. Is there a good cross effect? Yeah, we'll go for one right here. So, like, it's like these kinds of situations right here where potentially you want different debuffs kind of spread out in a different area. They gave you a lot of different strategic options on these debuffs. It's cool to have them spread out in this particular way. To me, it feels great. Again, that's not to say that this is like the only time any game has ever done it or something, but I like how it's implemented here, and it feels good. Now that said, if you have certain combinations of units, they may potentially just completely not function in the early game. I felt like a lot of the early game cross-classing maybe needed a little bit of a warning to let you know that they weren't invested enough in their stats to make certain things worthwhile. Because over time, it's definitely become a very, very kind of interesting and fun thing to see these different cross-classing opportunities shine with those debuff casting wizards over there, combining in with. Wait, what? Did the second one miss too, or what just happened there? Okay, I think Second Strike wanted to function with a pistol, but it's not designed to work with a pistol. Is what happened there. Anyway. What else? Actually, speaking of cross-classing, enemy units so far have not used cross-classing abilities. I'm assuming because of the same thing I mentioned earlier, where effectively, when it comes to their what they come in with, they will typically have whatever class they have maxed out in order to what was I trying to say here? Just in order to make them good for setting up like a cross class of your own. Now, would I like to see multiple classes combined? Yeah, but I can kind of see why they just wound up with sticking with one. If this is going at the pace that I think that it's going, it pretty much would be too much to go for 3 classes anyway, because they just simply wouldn't have the skill slots for it. And then if you tried to kind of stretch it out beyond that, then, you know, it might just lead to a bit too much chaos. So 2 classes is fine. Typically, like 2 or 3 is normally what I would say, like realistically, the system could probably handle. So if they're coming in already maxed out for one of them, that just gives you the choice of the second one, which, yeah, that works. All right. What do I want to do here? I guess he's just going to go attack the 2 horses. So let's see. He should have his roar. There we go. Let's go hit those guys real quick. It's interesting that the roar ability that he's got over there is actually pretty handy in terms of like it makes your own units faster and then breaks down enemy units to some degree. Okay, I failed to talk about the ninja earlier. I meant to talk about their abilities because I didn't understand what their deal was. They were advertised right when you get them as like, hey, they're the guys that use these cool throwing daggers. It's kind of neat, and then you get them and they don't have any throwing dagger abilities. So there's that. Anyway, so we'll go ahead and switch them out with this unit right here. Can they do that? Okay, it only works with allies. Whatever. It does mention that it only works with allies. I just wasn't reading it right. It just allows him to potentially reposition people. It's a good thing. It's just a lot of the ninja abilities so far have been a little lackluster. I was expecting more of like a ranged and poison kind of situation going on with them. Haven't really seen that though. Alright, let's go for this one. Earlier I messed up a flank setup because bash doesn't work with flanks in this one. Alright, there is a good attack available for you. Why don't you go flatten this archer? Or just attack him? Alright, yeah, he doesn't... This is too big of a elevation difference for him to land that hit. Okay. Back to the original plan of just reviving then. So this whole situation will feel very familiar for any Tactics Ogre fans of like... one or two knights with rampant aura going and blocking off the entire map. Okay, so he went and dodged. Okay, quick fire kind of shooting me in the literal back over there. Not ideal, but you see how the skill works. It's why it's designed for bows and not for handguns. I probably should take that off him, but it has been more useful than not in most situations. Okay, interesting swing. Why did that work? Oh, he attacked at a diagonal. Or not a diagonal, but he was attacking upwards. Wasn't sure why it was working that way for a second there. All right. So yeah, this kind of day-to-day stuff feels really nice. I can't say that that there's too much, like, the overall story-wise, that I've been crazy invested in. Half the time I don't know what's going on, but I like the mood that they try to set in the scenes, if that makes sense. Where it's been nice to see emotional responses from characters. It's been nice to see those little moments where somebody's specifically gesturing towards somebody else in order to quietly talk to them in the background. I mean, they are a little bit exaggerated in order to make sure that they're still conveying the message, but still, like, it feels good. Those kinds of scenes, you can tell somebody had their heart in it, and that's really what I'm looking for. To me, give a shit factor is pretty high on the list. It's why a lot of things that I end up liking on this channel are occasionally hard to describe in terms of why I like them so much, but usually after a little bit of explanation it makes sense. Okay. In this case, we're getting a little bit camera screwed, of all things. Whatever. Alright, looks like he is having a little bit of a hard time breaking through here, but it's fine. Go ahead and attempt to stab that one. Didn't quite work out. Had a little bit of a panic moment there, because on my side, I have I basically have the preview right above where this one's screen is, so it kind of looked like they were double the units up there. Thankfully, that's not the case. Anyway, we'll just go ahead and make sure that this guy never gets a turn again. So this is my favorite kind of setup right here. We didn't do it very effectively right here, but you go for the stun, you go for the bash, and then you just proceed to complete Operation Beat the Shit out of that guy. I love how many flank attacks you can combine at one time in this one. Again, the only time I've seen nearly as many flank attacks has been Tactics Ogre Reborn. But even then, like, the amount of abilities you can potentially set up through stuff like lances and flank and revenge and whatnot is like downright comical, and I love that. Now, you will see the occasional graphical glitch. For example, as the game has gone on, I've seen a few random graphical glitches that I honestly can't explain. Like right here, if the barbarian, like, it's specifically this barbarian. If this guy gets into certain positions, I don't know what kind, I don't know why, his hammer will just sort of appear right there. It was only that particular hammer, and none of the other ones. This is the only time I've ever seen this. But it has happened fairly consistently for that particular hammer. He is using an obsidian one, I believe, for the purposes of, maybe that helps to identify the issue. But yeah, occasionally, if he's, like, whether he's knocked out or if he just takes a swing, occasionally his hammer just sort of hangs out in the air. Maybe it's Mjolnir. I don't frickin' know. It's just kind of got a mind of its own. On top of that, there's also been a weird bug specifically with my Flank Knight, where at certain times, for, once again, relatively unexplained reasons as far as I can tell, they've just sort of appeared, but giant. So instead of being on their horse, like, if there's a situation where the game wants to deploy that particular unit, but they've already, like, run out of space or whatever else, it will instead deploy a gigantic version of that knight for some reason. So that's a thing. Also, is this actually functioning right now? Hang on, let's see. We hit this guy. This camera situation's a little bit funky right now. But yeah, where's my tile? Okay, we hit the guy, and then we hit the other guy. There we go, and there we go. Sounds good to me. Wait a minute, you're still living? Okay, well we gotta sort out that problem. We'll deal with him when we deal with him, I suppose. But yeah, teamwork and occasional... I say occasional sandbagging is is pretty effective in this one. You don't really have any penalty for repeatedly bringing people back, and there's kind of an incentive to create revival type of parties. Though before you say that that's the end-all be-all strategy and oh no, everything became dead brain, I would argue that instead it's more of a situation where, like, I've deployed parties that are strictly for offense, or strictly for defense, or strictly for this sandbagging bullshit that I love to do. See, it depends on the context. Like here and in Reborn, I love the way that the sandbagging goes. Something like FFT or Tactics Ogre PSP, the feel is entirely different for how that sandbagging works. Anyway, let's see. Will this count as an attack? Nah. I was hoping it might hit him with the edge of the swing. It was worth a shot. It would have been kind of funky, but sometimes this game, this game follows that mentality of like technically, if you're allowed to do a thing, then just go for it most of the time. So, like with an archer, sometimes they'll make a shot that seems incongruous, but hey, go for it. We're technically going to allow it, kind of a situation. All right. Yeah, as this guy continues doing his being awesome thing as he does. All right. As much as I would really, really like to be able to take that unit out right now with an ambush, unfortunately he is not currently built up his points for it. So we'll see if we can get a lucky crit. Yeah, that got him pretty good. This is why you want to have archers or other ranged units with crit abilities to be able to potentially one-shot or at least close to one-shot enemy squishies. It's kind of just generally useful around main, kind of like mainline frontliners and whatnot. But when it comes to those squishies, you can potentially really change a fight quickly that way. Alright, let's go ahead and zoom the camera out so I stop screwing myself over with that. And let's go ahead and stun this guy. So, when there was the option over who to betray between the sword masters and the ninjas, you know what? Actually, that gets us over to the thing on choices. So yes, you do have choices over which factions to switch with at certain points. This isn't really a factor early on. Pretty much whatever your choice is, you're joining that rebellion. Supposedly, well, okay, I did see some changes in dialogue. Supposedly, there are also other minor changes in dialogue depending on how you handled fights. Like whether you took out leaders first or whatever else, but I don't know the full extent of that, so I can't really comment on it. But I will say that it was at least nice to see one of the choices potentially sticking out there. It's not something you'll necessarily see that often, though. This is not a game about your changing choices. Like, this isn't a tactics ogre in that way, but I would say this one's more about the day-to-day gameplay. Let's see. But yeah, as far as the choices go, I really didn't see much outside of small things here and there for dialogue changes or whatnot. Now, some of it might have been direct changes, some of it might not have been. Like I noticed, there were certain cases where there were the options to kill off entire parties, and then also the option to go back and just take out the leader, and it seemed like the dialogue had changed for just taking out the leader, but I don't know for certain whether that's really the case. It felt like it was the case, and I guess in some ways that might be the important thing, whether it felt like it did the thing or not. But yeah, as far as I could tell, I frankly couldn't. It might be there, it might not be. That's probably something I should probably ask the devs about. I can probably comment that on the full playthrough there. But the interesting thing about this system is that there is this kind of feeling that fights don't really have a point where they can't be pulled back. What I like about this cross-classing system is that, like you see right here, we're having a case where we have multiple units that were taken out in pretty dramatic fashion, but we still have recovery abilities that might potentially allow us to pull this back. We have a support system in place to kind of facilitate that, and the option for kind of taking delay actions or potentially just burning out the enemy units there, because they will eventually get tired after a few casts and whatnot. It gives it a nice overall rhythm. There are certainly cases like right here where there's quite a bit coming our way, but she ended up running out of MP. She threw a rock. She got her defense reduced from that counter ability there. and so that's fine. So, like right now, their archer and their wizard, like two of them are just kind of out of our reach, so to speak. So all I'm really trying to do here is trying to get some units into position, essentially trying to use some heals to get them surrounded. And then hopefully we can make a little bit of a comeback here. But it gives it a nice flow. That there's a constant feeling of you're losing, you're coming back, you're losing, you're coming back. I should also mention the recruit system at this point, because yes, we're still talking about just overall systems, mechanics, what have you. Where you have recruit and retreat systems that are still playing a part in this particular case. Like those units on horses, realistically, I'm expecting to hopefully not have to fight them at all. Ideally, I want to see their morale broken, and I just want them to run away, because that is a huge health bar that I don't want to deal with. So what I'm going to try to do is attempt to isolate down these healers and casters off to the side, and typically the last 2 or 3 units will panic and run. So this would be especially ideal in the case of these mounted units that are going to be pretty difficult to put down without flank attacks. But this is what I mean about those kind of heavy mounted units actually being a pretty reasonable threat. I feel like in many cases where folks were going and asking for more to be done with the mounts, like, they already do a lot. You don't necessarily, and this actually kind of gets over to that thing where you regularly see folks arguing about, like on the Tactics Ogre side with the whole like One Vision versus Reborn thing, where it's like you don't really necessarily need more options to get more strategic stuff out of it. There are certainly situations where, you know, having more options is the ideal thing, but you can also do more with less in a lot of cases. So in this case, just the horses and what they imply by themselves leads to a lot of potential modifications to your units. Leads to a lot of different strategic situations there, and you know, pretty much any unit will have some kind of justifiable reason to be turned into that unit, except for rogues who can't mount a horse. Yeah, that guy died pretty good. Yeah, we're going to have a hard time reaching them. I should also probably reiterate, just for those that will inevitably be like, oh, this difficulty seems like bullshit. That is because I intentionally select the difficulty that modifies it based on your win streak, which currently has been extensive. So, we're doing okay there. Anyway, let's just go ahead and... Oh, dang it. Yeah, Second Strike does not want to operate versus that attack, but either way, we have them cornered over here. I'm hoping once we finish off that mage right there, the horses will panic and run, because yeah, I'd really prefer not to deal with them if I could. Here's Stun Strike on you. Man, that's, that mage over there refuses to die. That's unfortunate for us, actually. Okay. Rekindle, let's go ahead and get you up. I should also mention, I believe anyway, that MP might determine, or your total MP might determine regeneration speed, because over time they have been able to consistently keep Rekindle up in a basic form. In some cases, if they attack with Paralytic or something like that, they're able to keep the other versions up. So potentially something to consider. Anyway, let's go for the precision to go for the flank. Go. And his health is pretty low. I'm going to leave him right here. This guy needs to get himself up on his feet and then attempt to go at least pressure these horses, I think. Let's go ahead and... there we go. Chug some heals. So on the life and death system, I should also probably mention that your plot-required characters, if they bleed out, you're fine. As much as I usually like to see characters having, you know, a change in dialogue or something if they die, in this particular case, given the fact that plot choice isn't really as much of a focus here, like in Tactics Ogre, having characters die from something stupid will change the entire story. In this case, the story is going to be pretty much the same anyway, so as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to characters not getting killed off when they're bleeding out during fights, that's fine. Your named characters basically have infinite lives. They're just taken out for that fight. Actually, I think they might have just taken out the support network. Dang it. Well, hopefully they're going to run away as soon as we finish off the last 2 infantry here. You really would kind of hope that they would have left already, but oh well. There we go. They're dead. And now we move on this way. So, like, as you can see, that plot ninja guy, he's just kind of face-planted on the ground over there. And it's a combination of surrounding units as well as how the fight's going in general. So, like, the later you get on in the fight, the more they're going to be kind of willing to run away there. Alright, let's take advantage of our spear stabby thing, move over here, take a diagonal. Alright. Go for the stun, go for the follow-up. Dang. That guy just does not care. And in fact, we're getting worryingly low on overall health on this party right now, especially if Tardy gets taken out right here. Okay. Well, that's concerning. Alright. This is potentially still fine. The one issue with all of this is that it does make follow-ups a bit difficult sometimes. Like, right there, I don't really know what changed the turn order. That potentially caused our guy to go lower in the turn order. That seems a little bit unreliable at times. He was fine a moment ago until he wasn't. Anyway, let's continue pressuring on here. So you go ahead and take your actions, you move on forward. What are you going to do? You're probably going to take out... Oh, never mind. They're just going to go for the throwing rock. Perfect. In which case, let's go ahead and put you in position over here. Do we go for another stun? I feel like the odds are too low of it succeeding. What about a recruit? Really high chance of recruit. Okay, come on, do it. Perfect. Okay, we now have a healer. That guy's going to melt away. We might lose some of our support casters and might have to make new ones. Alright, that's fine. Alright, so they're just kind of deciding what to do. Now let's see, we get a rekindle. Kind of glad that they didn't decide to use rekindle on their own people. Alright, one rekindle over in that direction, please. And I think that probably should be checkmate here. So eventually, once we surround these guys, hopefully they'll decide to start running away. Yeah, alright. They're getting sandbagged. Right. You go forward, you're really resistant to arrows, so you go in that direction. Let's see. Do we have a regular heal here? Yes. Oh, actually, one more thing I should probably mention. The music is actually improved over time as well. So you love to see that. Anyway, one of the main weaknesses of horses is the fact that they can be stunned. So, there we go. They are now stunned. The stun and flank combo versus horses, like, it completely wrecks them. So I'm not terribly concerned about it going forward now that we've gotten that stun off. I can just have him repeatedly stack stun and we should be good to go. Alright, so you just stay where you are, they're going to stay stunned, and we're going to keep stacking it and stacking it and stacking it, and then hopefully the archer will run away. There we go. The shield... So it's interesting because the shields will seemingly reduce some of the attack, but not necessarily all of it. Kind of interesting to see it play out that way. Anyway. So we get the breach off, we get some of that off. Let's go ahead and get the double flank going right here. One stab, one hammer, one more stab. Alright. Now, certain debuffs will wear off once the unit falls off the horse. So in this case, stun seems to wear off depending on the number of stacks. Like, I think it actually directly removes one stack of every debuff or something. Because, like, rooted, I've generally seen stay there. Stun seems like it lowers the amount of available stuff or what have you. Yeah, that guy's already bled out, so he's just a prop at this point. Let's see, one intense heal. Let's go for you. Actually, no, just heal yourself so that you don't die from another arrow. Alright. And we actually might be able to take advantage of some flank shenanigans if this does at least one damage. It does. So we go for the staff, we go for the stab, and there we go. And I like this system. It feels good. Like, this system just generally feels good to play around with. Alright, that one's down, but it's fine. We just chased down the last guy. They're apparently feeling extremely confident, because normally they would have run away by this point. I don't know why they're still here, but it's fine. If they really want to be run down that badly, that's fine. Just go and overwhelm them real quick. Alright. Go for the rekindle. Notably different from Amazon's version. Or actually, no, wait. That would be the Amazon version. What the hell's the other one? It's like the frickin' note or something? I don't remember. I don't read ebooks that often. I just use my phone for that. Okay. One miss with that hammer, which thankfully didn't glitch out this time. Is he going to panic? No. He sees the opportunity to sandbag, which is fine. Whatever. We'll just break this guy down then. It actually also might be possible that the horse prevents him from running, maybe? Alright, don't turn him on AI. We don't really need AI as of yet. Yeah, I'm willing to bet as soon as we knock him off the horse, he'll want to run away. Alright. So, are you going to run now? Or are you still feeling confident? I mean, I guess it doesn't really matter if we just one-shot him, so there's that. Because his defense was lowered from before. See, that's what I mean. Like, defense breaks in the mid-game seemingly going onward. Yeah, they actually do quite a decent bit there. A combination of Breach and Warstrike there was doing 400, which is, like, again, just one-shotting the guy. One thing I will say, I really wish that there was an option, like I can mash all the buttons I want, but nothing seems to skip past this ridiculously long, like, scene right here, where it's counting everything up. I'm assuming it's a mechanical safety thing. Maybe it specifically needs to be able to count this section, but it goes on a while. They would like to join? Neat. Alright, and now we have Priest plus something. We'll see what we want to do here. Alright, what are they going to do here? Oh, they're leftover resistance people. But see what I mean about, like, the cutscenes seem to be trying to do stuff to convey stuff and what have you. Alright. I don't know who this guy is. Okay, this guy I've seen in a cutscene. The other guy, I have no idea who he is. He might have shown up at some point. Not sure. Like the way that they're hunched over and looking over for stuff. Like, there's a lot of custom animations in this. Let's see. I don't remember who Razia is. I don't know. Is that guy Razia? Oh, they're talking about somebody from ages ago. Okay, never mind. Okay. I was wondering who the hell they were... Okay, whatever. So they do seem to again, give a crap about establishing where people are and why. There was clearly an attempt made there. There are certain bits and pieces that do seem like they're missing context. I should probably mention earlier, during the whole samurai and ninja thing, like, there was supposed to be an ambush on a city that, like, blew open the city gates and they got rushed through and whatever else. But you just see them walk through an empty hole, so I'm assuming there was an explosion that just didn't happen or something. Alright. So just read some plot stuff so I know what's going on later. Obviously, spoilers if you don't know what's going on. I mean, granted, spoilers anyway. Alright. So I guess we're just sort of leaving. Fair enough. Like, this whole thing is, from what I understand, kind of an introduction to the whole story, despite being, again, a fairly long game. At least so far, anyway. Let's see. Alright, fair enough. We're going after his old boss. Alright, there we go. Any darn ways, yeah. This is going on at decent length at this point. Hopefully, you get the general idea. Hopefully, you kind of get what I'm seeing in this one. I mean, there's a wide variety of different maps to fight through. There's a lot of different potential fun party comp stuff to do. Day-to-day gameplay is pretty darn fun. There's some like technical and execution jank, and I mean, like the whole hubbub about when this game launched and whatever else. That was bad messaging, but it is essentially on sale at this point for I think it's like 3 days or something at least. Either way, it's worth. As far as I'm concerned, it definitely seems worth it so far. Still, I was hoping to have the entire review through done by now, but it's based on what people were telling me at launch and whatever else. I was expecting it to be basically over at this point, so it's still going. Again, every one of these areas has been another map. Multiple of them have been revisited in different situations. Like, there's been stuff, and as far as projects worth supporting, like, again, my personal value judgment of a game isn't necessarily how somebody handled finances on the back end, it's how much give a shit went into the game itself, which, again, it seems like there was a lot of heart put into this here. I don't know how it ends yet, so, bear that out as you will, but as you saw, we are now... What is this? 27 hours into the thing? Folks are saying it's roughly the 40-hour mark where it ends, so there's still a lot here. And if you're a fan of the genre, there's stuff that you'll like here. Especially, again, the like defensive and counterplay, I find fun. So, anyway. That's about that. I really gotta get